robot arm. Back in the 1990s, Tuscaloosa, Alabama was dealing with incredibly high unemployment rates. This crisis was eventually solved when Mercedes, the multi-billion-dollar German car manufacturer, decided to open their first assembly plant outside Germany. With this new assembly plant came many additional companies like different suppliers, as well as other assembly plants belonging to Toyota, Hyundai, and Kia. In just a few years, tens of thousands of jobs were created in the state, and it became the centerpiece of Alabama's economy. As a result, the automobile industry became a piece of the local culture and was celebrated by young and old people alike. As a result, many children were inspired to eventually get a job in one of these factories. One of these children was Regina Elsia, who was born in 1995. Her parents worked in the factories, and she would see transports of car parts on a daily basis. However, as she grew older, her interests changed, and she dreamed of becoming a pediatrician. As a result, she tried to study medicine after finishing high school. While she was enrolled in community college, she got engaged to her kindergarten friend Dan. The young couple moved in together and dreamed of getting their own place, but they didn't have much money. With Dan making minimum wage, Regina decided to quit her studies and search for a job. After all, she could resume her studies later, and she didn't want her relationship with Dan to fail over money. In 2016, she began searching for a job, and after just 1 month, she received an offer. To no one's surprise, Regina landed a job as an assembly line worker at a car parts supplier factory. So in the end, the girl did end up working in the industry that had astonished her as a child. Alongside her stepfather and sister, she worked at Ajin USA, a supplier for Hyundai and Kia. However, both her relatives working there, as well as her mother, warned her about taking this job. The simple reason for this was the terrible working conditions. These supplier companies are bound by their daily quotas and are fined if they can't deliver what they promised. As a result, assembly line workers are hired constantly and are sent to work without receiving any training. This includes security training. Furthermore, the salary is bad, and you are pushed to work extra hours and to cut corners. Just do everything necessary to reach the daily quota. But Regina dismissed these warnings. She needed money for their house, the family dog, and the wedding dress of her dreams. When Regina began working at Ajin, she was put on temporary status with a salary of $8.75 per hour. Her goal was to reach full-time employment, which would result in a $1.75 raise. In order to do that, she volunteered for 12-hour shifts 7 times a week. But after 6 months of this brutal work, she was completely burned out. She couldn't do it anymore and decided to search for a new workplace, hoping to find a nice part-time job that would enable her to finally continue her studies on the side. Since the whole family was against her working at this company from the beginning, they were obviously happy about her decision. But on June 18th, Regina was still working at Ajin. That day, she was overseeing a robot in charge of welding metal pillars, which would then serve as a foundation for the side view mirrors, onto cars. The robot was basically a giant arm with sharp welding tips. At some point, one of these robots suddenly broke down. Regina was overseeing these robots from a computer screen, while the actual robots were located inside metal cages meant to protect employees. The malfunctioning robot belonged to a member of her team, and without it, they wouldn't be able to reach the daily quota. As a member of this team, this would also have consequences for Regina. she and 2 additional co-workers checked out the robot and decided to call maintenance. But for some reason, the maintenance crew didn't show up. With every passing minute, they were losing their chance to still reach their quota. Fearing the possible consequences, Regina just entered the metal cage and walked up to the robot. There, she begins to do something to this robot with her tools. And at some point, it actually worked, and the robot started to work again. There was just one problem. Since none of the workers had received any security training, they didn't know the procedure of fixing such a robot. Normally, you should start a lockout procedure, which locks the robot's power switch. Then the robot will not restart even if you fix the issues, which is an important security measure. But this isn't what Regina and co-workers were taught. They were only taught to reach the quota. So when Regina fixed the robot, it sprang right back into action. Since Regina was standing with her back to it, she was impaled by the robot's welding tools when it suddenly swung back around, eager to finish its work. Regina was impaled and pushed against a wall before her co-workers managed to hit the emergency button, stopping the robot. But this didn't solve the issue. Regina was now pinned against a wall, still impaled. One of her co-workers instantly got into a forklift and searched for a maintenance worker. When he finally found one, he brought him back to the robot. There, Regina was still impaled, but conscious. However, this maintenance worker happened to be completely incompetent. He didn't speak English, and when he saw Regina, he literally just fled the scene, out of shock. Shortly after, emergency crews arrived at the scene and managed to free the woman. Regina was brought to a hospital and then to a trauma center, but sadly, Regina would pass away due to the wounds she had sustained. Following this incident, Arjun was harshly criticized for not having any safety training. They ultimately plead guilty to being responsible for her death by not training her properly. Regina's family was awarded $1.5 million in damages. Squid attack. In July 1990, Alex Kirstick, a marine biology high school teacher, and 3 of his friends traveled to Mexico. There, they were working on a documentary about sea life in the Gulf of California. Using a 70-foot research vessel filled with all their camera and diving equipment, they drove out to sea in the middle of the night. 30 minutes from the harbor, they stopped at an area famous for its rich marine life. After preparing everything, they turned on big spotlights and aimed them at the water in order to hopefully film some animals. But they weren't going to rely on pure luck. One of the crew members put a big piece of tuna on a fishing hook and threw it into the water. With the bait in place, all they had to do was wait. Just a few moments later, something happened. Suddenly a shadow emerged from the depth of the water and took the tuna. Since they didn't get a clear look at this thing, they repeated the same procedure. Again, the shadow rushed up to the surface and took the tuna to the depths of the oceans. But this time, Alex and his colleagues had seen something amazing. The animal seemed to be glowing in red and white colors. Seeing this, they formed a theory, but it seemed so unlikely that they had to go for a 3rd test. Once again, they threw out the tuna, and the mystery animal came to feast on it. This time, dozens of these glowing creatures came to the surface and fought for the food. And this time, the crew was able to get a good look at these creatures. What they had just found were Humboldt squids, a really rare type of squid that communicates via changing their skin color. In fact, this species was so rare that at that time, no living specimen had been filmed. So far, only dead Humboldt squids had been found after their corpses were washed ashore. Alex and his friends realized that they were about to make history. Their little documentary now had the potential to become a worldwide sensation. In their excitement, they decided to put on their diving suits and get into the water to film the squids. A decision that any expert would have advised against. These squids are true apex predators. They are 8 foot long, with 8 arms and 2 long tentacles. These tentacles are equipped with suckers, and from these suckers grow their teeth. Although those are more akin to small knives than to normal teeth. If these animals manage to latch onto prey, they pull it towards their beak. And yes, this beak is very similar to a bird's beak, and these squids use it to bite down on their prey. Once their prey is inside their mouth, it basically gets shredded by a tongue, covered with hundreds of the aforementioned teeth. And since these squids have a gag reflex, they usually eat their prey alive in a tormentingly slow process. Furthermore, they usually pull their victims into deeper water once they latch onto it, because they feel safer there. And if you are wondering, yes, they do these exact same things to humans as well. In fact, they are one of the few animals that are actively aggressive towards humans. I guess if Alex and his friends would have thought about this, they might have reconsidered getting into the water. But they were too amazed by the whole situation and ignored any logic. For a few minutes, they actually managed to capture some amazing footage. But then something really random happened. A shark also got interested in the tuna, despite seeing all the squids surrounding it. When this new predator realized that there was no more tuna, it tried to turn back, but got stuck on the hook. This now immobile predator was now a new food source for the squids. And of course, Alex and his friends think that this would make amazing footage. A group of rare Humboldt squids ripping apart a 14-foot shark. And again, they did manage to get some great footage. But then the situation took a dire turn. Alex noticed that he was suddenly sinking. At first, he ignored this and focused on capturing the scene. But when he began to sink faster and faster, he looked down and his blood froze. One of the Humboldt squids had wrapped his tentacle around one of his legs and was dragging him into deeper water for consumption. Alex panicked and actually managed to free himself by kicking the squid. He then turned around and tried to swim back to the boat, but there were now 40 feet between him and the boat. Additionally, Alex was now marked as prey. As a result, the other squids came towards him. One of them managed to grab Alex from behind and swung his tentacle around Alex's neck. The only body part not protected by his diving suit. At this point, Alex was basically strangled to death while getting cut in the throat and while being dragged underwater. He tries to fight back and once again manages to fight off the squid. But now he was 55 feet away from the boat, even farther than before. But like I said, these animals are really intelligent and communicate perfectly. The moment he was marked as prey, the situation was nearly inescapable. After swimming just a few feet, another squid rushed up from the depths and grabbed Alex's entire head with its 2 tentacles. For now, his dive mask was saving him from literally getting his head crushed by the squid's beak. But once again, Alex managed to save himself. And this time, the squid seemingly decided to let him go. They just watched and hovered around him while he finally swam back to shore. Alex later said that he turned around one last time while climbing the boat's ladder. According to him, all the squids were gathering underneath him and were flashing red and white at each other while watching him. After he got back to safety, his cuts were treated and was physically okay. Something you cannot say for this mental health. But in the end, he did reach his goal, because he survived and their footage became legendary, especially his story of fighting and escaping 3 Humboldt squids. The boiling pots. One of Hawaii's most popular attractions is the beautiful Rainbow Falls on the eastern side of the Big Island. But just about a mile away from these falls, there is another water attraction that fewer people seem to visit. The so-called boiling pots were created following a volcanic eruption 10,000 years ago. Magma flowed down into a river, and when the magma was cooled, the water around it formed small pot-like pools. Their name derives from the fact that periodically they seem to be boiling. This phenomenon appears due to a vast system of caves underneath these pools. During floods, the extra water is pumped up and down these caves, thereby shaking the water and making it seem like it is boiling. And while this looks cool, it is really dangerous because a person could be pulled inside these caves, which is also the reason why it is strictly forbidden to enter these boiling pots. You can take a look at them from a platform, but under no circumstances should you ever enter one of the pools. A warning the 62-year-old Jolie Ricewig ignored back in 2015. Jolie was a swimming instructor and known for her adventurous spirit. This is also the reason she ran a bed and breakfast mostly focused on providing guests with small adventures, usually involving water and water activities. But on September 15th, she planned an entirely new adventure for one of her male guests. Even though she was from Hawaii and signs were clearly stating that entering them was forbidden, Jolie aimed to enter the boiling pots. She rationalized this by telling herself that they weren't going to swim in the boiling pots and instead would only use inflatable rafts. A really weird idea, especially considering that she was a swimming instructor. Either way, Jolie and the guest went through with the plan and began to float in one of the pools. Suddenly, there was a rush of water coming towards their pool. They tried to get out of the water, but the flood catapulted them over the edge into the next pool. Even more fatal was the fact that they had now lost their rafts. Without them, they were now swimming in the water, slaves to this new current. They could see that the current was pushing towards the next pool. However, they did manage to reach the edge, and Jolie managed to push the man out of the water. Just seconds after getting rescued, the man turned around to save Jolie, but she was gone. Thinking that she must have been dragged off to the next pool, he went down the river. But after checking several pools, he didn't find Jolie. He contacted authorities, and a large search was issued. However, even after searching all of the pools and the surrounding rivers, there was no trace of Jolie. The search was called off, and a theory was created that explained her disappearance. It was logical to assume that Jolie had been dragged into the underwater caves. This underground system is vast, and should a person get dragged into it, there is no hope to save or recover them. It is assumed that just seconds after saving the guest, she was pulled down by the current and pushed into one of these caves where she drowned. It would take 5 months for the current to release her body, upon which she was found in one of the pools.